got an event in Cleveland, but I know I'm going to
Okay.
Crystal.
Shannon, did you sent out the thing, right? I did. Oh, praise the Lord. All right, let's get after it. All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Akron Citizens Police Oversight Board for September the 18th, 2024. We'll begin and we'll call the meeting to order and do our roll call. Aniskevich?
Here.
Gippin? Oh, Gippin. Mr. Peoples will be absent. Hawkins?
Here.
Castle?
Here.
Costa?
Present.
Richards?
Here.
Jones? Jones is here. I see her up there. Okay, great.
She needs to, is there a way to let her, have her check her?
Jones? We're taking attendance.
Does she have does she have the city computer? There's a little tab at the very top that you have to slide over. That might be why she can't hear us.
No, that's just for video.
Huh?
That's just for video.
No, I can't.
Says she can't hear us. Neither can Anthony.
I wonder if they can log out and log back in.
Okay.
Says
Yeah,
the
ask him, Shannon, to log out and log. Can you hear us now?
Yes,
Awesome. Jones?
present.
Awesome.
Okay, cool.
Thank you. Boyd is here as well. I'd like to make a motion to review and approve the minutes from last meeting. Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Fourth item, I'll read our purpose of the Akron Citizens Police Oversight Board. The overarching mission of the Akron Citizens Police Oversight Board is to foster conditions and police practices that ensure the safety of all residents of the city of Akron. The CPOB is empowered by a new city charter provision to independently direct the police auditor, whose office reviews investigations into complaints and misconduct involving officers. The board and auditor also review every standard investigation, whether by Akron Police Department or outside agencies, into the use of deadly force by an officer. Our values. Our decisions and actions are motivated by our love for Akron and our desire for all to feel safe in the community. We value unity in voice and action. We respect each other and those we serve. We seek to build relationships of trust, and we seek to always conduct ourselves with integrity. We listen to understand, learn, and lead. We strive to be inclusive of all stakeholders' voices. We value change at a system level. We hold ourselves accountable for our actions and deeds, and we hold our partners and those we serve to be accountable for their actions and deeds. This time, we'll move over to Ms. Aniskevich for agenda item 5, which is our public comment.
Yes, before we get to public comments, for those who are going to give public comments, I'm going to set a timer, and when you hear it beep, you know that your 3 minutes are up, okay? All right, so just let me get Apostolette, please.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
For those who may be in the room or even listening, I stand today to tell you that police service is real, and so is domestic violence. I come before this board this evening to ask you all to do another formal investigation for me, because somewhere in Akron Police Department and its affiliates, they're putting out that I'm mentally ill, and to lock me up if I call 911 and to do bad things to me. I wrote a letter because Jody Glitzenstein from Oriana House decided to harass me because during the second day of training, I asked questions like, where is the spiritual component of the person? And some people from the LGBTQ community got offended, saying that preachers are bad and that type of thing. I asked about the racial concerns of success. I asked basic questions, and then they kicked me out. Then Jody began calling me, and when I went to go get my money for my 2 days of training, I called for Akron Police 911 for a police escort to go into the building so that no one would bother me. They sent a mental health unit and kept asking me, are you sure you don't want to go to the hospital? I was like, what would I be going to the hospital for? And they kept insisting on it, and I kept saying, what would I need to go? And then a short white woman, for the purpose of description, came out and asked what was going on. They said my name, and she said, oh, we know all about her. And she was very abrupt with me. And even after I got what I needed, they kept asking me, are you sure you don't need to go to the hospital? And it was two white officers, white male officers and a white female officer. And every time I call 911, whether it be in Akron or wherever it is, something is in their computers red flagging me. And I'm divorced twice, and one of the fathers who I'm divorced by is here in Akron, and I have been doing complaints of mental abuse. And I would like to know, have you all investigated to see how the Akron police and other affiliates do respond to mental abuse for victims of domestic violence? And I lost my children and everything else behind this. My son is now sitting in Cuyahoga County Jail, who was stolen from me when he was 5 years old, when others violated my protection order. And I haven't heard from him. No one has heard from him since Saturday. And he's been being abused and trafficked in these jails ever since he's been stolen from us. And I would like to know what is really going on in the police department that supports violation of protection orders and are being abused, as well as my other 3 children. And here's the documents, if you would like to have a copy of it. And I encourage you to encourage people to still call the police, no matter what. Thank you.
Thank you, Apostolate.
And my name is Pamela Pinckney, too, just so you all know. I just go by Apostolate because it's a title, and my pastor is Reverend Dr. Curtis Mentor.
Okay.
Thank
I
you.
just called the name that's...
No, I know. I was just telling you.
So if you want us to call you Pamela...
No, it's your choice. I said that for your choice. No reason, because some people don't understand. Okay. Thank you all. Have a good evening. I gotta get the Bible started.
Lee Holden, please.
Good evening.
Good evening.
On a personal note, I think congratulations are in order because for the first time you have a full complement. You have all your board members, you have a full office staff, and that's something to celebrate. You've got a very dedicated board, and you've got a really star-studded office that Akron can be proud of. So congratulations to you for that. Now, speaking on behalf of the Criminal Justice Committee of the Akron NAACP, at your last meeting, you had quite a bit of conversation about the Community Engagement Committee and what you might do along those lines. And we think that the most important thing for you to do in terms of community engagement is to focus really focus your attention on helping the community understand the process of filing a complaint, and then what happens to the complaint, what to expect once they have filed a complaint, what kind of response they can expect, and what kinds of changes can be made through the complaint process. I think there's still some confusion about a citizen complaint and a use of force incident that's initiated by the Akron Police Department. So I think people can benefit from additional information and clarity about just the mechanics of the office and how things work and how that all feeds into policy change. So that's what we really ask you to do with the resources that you have at hand for community engagement. So thank you.
I have a question. Do you have any, in that vein, and since you've been thinking about this, do you have an idea on how we could do that on a really broad level?
Actually, thank you for the question, because that's something that I forgot to mention. We've noticed that the Akron Civil Rights Commission has a pretty robust public awareness campaign, and they also deal with citizen complaints, and so there's maybe a little parallel there. So it might be a starting point to look at what the Akron Civil Rights Commission does in that regard.
Okay.
Thanks for the question.
Thank you, Ms. Holden. That's it for the community.
Thank you, Ms. Anaskevich, and we want to say thank you to our public for their comments and their responses and also their thoughts and ideas. We're going to move into now agenda item 6, which is our committee report outs, starting with Mr. Fennell and our auditor's report. Mr. Fennell.
Yes, good afternoon or good evening, everyone, and I apologize for not being able to be there in person on this evening. I've got a couple of items I want to present to the board. One is a case review, a use of force review, where I have some recommendations, and then, of course, my biweekly report of the office activities. So I'll first move into the use of force review. It is case number 2024-000-68409. And it involved interaction between an Akron police officer and a member of the public in the area of Market in Maine on a morning right after rush hour. And the officer had interacted with this man. He was called upon to investigate and look into an incident. The man refused to abide by the officer's directions. Actually, the man jumped into, not into like inside, but into the body of the police cruiser, then began to run from the officer. The man fell, and the officer was able to grab a hold of him. During that encounter, the man began kicking and striking the officer, and the officer called for assistance. Several officers responded rather quickly, and there were 6 officers at one point that had a hold of the man, trying to roll him over. The use of force that I centered on was on 4 officers, 3 of which I concur with the findings by Akron Police Department that the use of force by those 3 officers was objectively reasonable. 1 officer, I do not concur with their finding of objectively reasonable, and I issued recommendation that finding be reversed and changed to not objectively reasonable. The officer in question, initially upon contacting this man as he was on the ground being detained and handled by 2 other officers, approached with using harsh, violent, profane language. During the course of the incident, the officer in question attempted to throw a punch with his fist at the man. He did not strike him in the head, but he struck him in the right shoulder. When the officers began to work together to roll the man over, this officer in question disengaged, repositioned himself around the man's body, and then used a taser on the man. which in my opinion was not necessary at that point. And then once the man had been handcuffed and brought to his feet, the man made some comments to the officer that had tased him and to the officers in general. And this particular officer had to be redirected by the initial responding officer to walk away and not continue to verbally engage this man in a back and forth. So as I looked at this incident and the actions of this particular officer, I did not find that his actions, the use of force was, as I said, objectively reasonable. I didn't find that his actions were professional. There were multiple officers engaged with this man, and none of the other 6 officers, the other 5 officers directly engaged with him, had felt the need to throw any punches. Clearly, they did not use any profanity towards the man. They were giving contradictory commands. They were giving vague commands of roll over and, continually saying roll over, but were not giving the man any real direction on whether to roll to his left, to his right, or which direction. And in fact, the officer that I found questioned with his use of force gave a very contradictory command multiple times of roll on your back and get on your back. Well, the other officers were trying to turn the man over onto his stomach. So he was being pulled in various directions by these officers. And ultimately, the initiating officer on the run took command of the situation and began to direct the officers with very specific directions of roll him towards me, roll him over towards me. And the officers began to work together to roll the man over onto his stomach in the direction as provided. And that is when the officer in question delivered what's called a drive stun with the taser. So my recommendations were 2 of them. One is the CPOB requests that APD change the disposition of Officer Oscar Alatorre's use of force under case number 2024-00068409 from objectively reasonable to not objectively reasonable, and to take appropriate disciplinary action as warranted by such a disposition. And the second recommendation is the CPOB also requests APD initiate an investigation into Officer Oscar Alatorre for the following: unprofessionalism, and then that is subcategory of profanity. So I ask that the board accept this report and the recommendations at this time.
Is there any discussions with Mr. Fennell regarding the report and also the recommendations before we make a motion to accept his report and the recommendation?
I have a question. When you make a recommendation such as this one, what's the next step that the Akron Police Department takes with you after you've made a recommendation like this that conflicts with the recommendation that they have, or the conclusion that they have?
Great question. The next step will be that I present my recommendations in the report to the mayor's office and to the city council. And the charter does not provide for any further action directed by me to ensure that the recommendations are accepted or acted upon. We recently have an agreement with the city administration through the mayor's office that I will receive a response within 45 days for each of recommendation that I make. So whether that response comes directly from the chief of police or through the mayor's office is yet to be determined. I've yet to receive a response of any of our recommendations. I expect that the chief of police may be provided with the recommendations, and he will draft a response to what actions, if any, will be taken on the recommendations that I've made and that have been presented by the board. But at this time, it's yet to be seen what actions or what that process will actually look like.
Last question, have any of your recommendations gone past that 45-day window?
Yes.
Okay, so when they've gone past that 45-day window, then what? What's the next step after that?
Well, we just reached that agreement with the 45-day window almost 2 months ago. So right now we're still waiting. We don't have a next step after that.
Mr. Fennell, for this last case that you reviewed, did you consider any general policy changes with that one? Or do you think the policy that went behind that was okay?
Well, I don't know necessarily if this would be a policy change, because in these situations, it's they're very dynamic and fluid. But one of the things I identified in looking at the multiple body worn camera video footage was that when the officers finally got control of the person that was ultimately arrested, the 5 officers out of the 6 actually, in my opinion, did followed their training in the way they controlled his limbs and protected his head, and prevented the gentleman from continuing to kick and fight with the officers. The only issue that I found, and I didn't place this wording in the report, but this is definitely something that I have made note to discuss with Chief Harding. He and I meet on regular occasions to discuss certain things, but this is one of them, which is that during this encounter, several officers were giving commands to the gentleman to roll over. And to me, it would have been confusing hearing that coming from your left side, your right side, down by your foot, and up by your head, and then not knowing which way to turn. So I applaud the officer who initiated the stop. It was Officer Hudson, and basically gaining control, verbal control of the situation, and directing his colleagues on which way to roll the gentleman over onto his stomach, and the other officers listening and then beginning to work together. I don't think so. So when you get to a policy issue, I don't necessarily think that that's something that should be put in a policy. I think it's more of maybe a reminder of when you are in a situation like that, that someone, whether it's the initiating officer or an officer of a higher rank or an officer with a specialty, be the one to give the commands on which way to maneuver or handle a person while you're trying to get them in handcuffs, so that you don't have multiple officers giving conflicting commands to an individual.
Thank you. That was kind of what I was after.
I have one more question, Mr. Fennell. Well, first I have a comment. I commend the officers, whoever they were, who took the initiative to de-escalate the situation, including getting the one officer who seemed to be, heading out of control to kind of back off. I commend them for doing that. And I think we need to see more of that with the police department. When there's more than one officer or a group of officers at a scene, somebody has to take control to make sure it doesn't escalate into something that no one wants it to be. So I commend them for that. But my next question is, in your opinion, Does this board need to come up with something, some kind of response to you're not getting your responses within that 45-day window? Do we need to start looking at something that we need to come up with? Because you can't, I mean, it can't just go blowing in the wind, like, oh, you know, they didn't respond, it's been 50 days, 60 days, we still haven't had a response, and then the complaints are still coming in, or your work is still going on. So in your opinion, do we need to come up with something? Do we need to start drafting something in governance or whatever, some response to the city as to if we don't get if we don't get those responses within 45 days, what's the next step?
I don't think at this point we need to go in that direction. I have had conversations with Chief Harding as late as I believe last Thursday or Friday, specifically about a timeline for a response to the De'Ara Fields report that I issued back in, I think, April. I expect his response within the next week or two. He stated it would be in before the end of September. And I know before they stated it'd be in before the end of August. But like I said, he assured me he has a draft that he wants to forward to me. And I'm looking forward to receiving that draft within the next few days as we prepare a response to the recommendations from that report. Again, I think we're developing a process, and at this point, I think having the board draft something formally might be just a little bit ahead of things getting, even though we've waited a while. And I think a little more time to see if the process that I think we've developed will work. And if not, then we can revisit this question.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, can I get a motion to accept the auditor's report and also the recommendation so we can move forward?
I move.
A second?
Second.
Second.
We'll roll call it. Aniskevich?
Yes.
Hawkins?
Yes.
Castle?
Yes.
Costa?
Yes.
Richards?
Yes.
Jones?
Yes.
Boyd, yes. Motion passes.
All right, thank you. And to the second report, I believe that should have been distributed electronically to the board members. But it's just a brief recap of the activities that the office has undertaken during the last couple of weeks. Currently, you'll see on the report we have 5 reports where we concur with APD findings, but also have some recommendations. And those 5 list the dates that they were submitted to the mayor and the city council. We reviewed 5 reports that we concur with the findings, and we still have the 1 report that we did not concur with any of the findings. That's the De'Ara Fields report. So we received 3 complaints over the last couple of weeks, and to date we have, again, 5 that concur with recommendations, 32 that we concur in totality, and 1 we do not concur with. Update on the current projects, our data and case management development. I met with the law department on regarding the best approach to purchase the system, so I'm awaiting response back as they look at some of the parameters and actions that a proposed vendor might be able to accomplish for us. Once we get that response back, we will most likely proceed with the RFP process, and then again, I'll announce when that's issued. Also have a meeting scheduled on next week with IT, and it's called an AI-assisted body camera review vendor to discuss some next steps in acquiring some AI technology to help us, help the office analyze and review the mountains of body-worn camera footage that we have. We currently have excess of 500 use of force incidents from 2022 through today, and each one has a certain amount of body-worn footage that we'll need to analyze and gather data from. The OIPA process and procedures, it was running fine up until yesterday, where I realized that the body worn camera footage that we have been receiving since August 1st does not, the identifiers that identify each video footage for an officer has been redacted. And so we're unable to effectively and efficiently identify the officers involved in the videos without that information. Prior to August 1st, the videos that I received all contain the identifying information of the officers. So I reached out directly to Chief Harding with my concern and some other documentation. Received word back that they are looking into the matter to see when and why this change was made. I made it clear that I will be re-requesting those the body-worn camera footage for the involved uses of force, with the expectation that that footage contain the required and necessary information to identify the officers, so that we can effectively review those uses of force and identify any issues that they may contain. And I hope to get a response back by the end of the week. If not, I'll be following up again with APD and also the city administration as to when we can expect to have this problem rectified. We don't have any issues with our access to the blue team. So we are receiving the cases, the reviews through our blue team. And in fact, between today and yesterday, I received 10. So that's just, that part of the process is working very well and have no problems with it. And contacted HR on yesterday to see where we stood with getting where we stood in our process for obtaining interns, and APS is on board. HR is working internally to get the administrative steps taken care of, and we should be able to post the position within the next couple of weeks. So we have the cooperation with APS, and we're now on the city side, HR side, just working through all of the administrative tasks that need to occur to get the requisition in place. And lastly, training. Our deputy independent police auditor is entering her third week of her internal affairs training. She's doing very well. She's also begun reviewing cases and completed a couple of case reviews, and she's moving along very nicely. So that concludes my report. I'll take any questions.
Mr. Fennell, could you, if you don't mind, and maybe you did this, but could you just briefly give our listening audience an understanding of accessing the blue team and how that is helping your department to function from a more efficient and effective posture?
Yes. The APD uses an IA Pro system, and part of that system, IA Pro is a proprietary case management system that is used by police departments all across the country, and APD also uses a system similar. And part of that is it's called Blue Team, and that is where the report documents are housed and tracked as a case management system. And we, the staff of OIPA, now has access to that system. So when the use of force review has gone through all of the channels that it needs to go through. On the APD side, I receive an email notification that tells me that case has now been assigned to me. I can then go in and build out our case file, internal case file from that file so that we can review the documents and review the outcome of APD's investigation. And if we concur with the findings, I simply upload our memo to the same case management system. It becomes a part of that. And I send it back, just route it back via email. If we do not concur with it, then I can upload our report once we've gone through our process, and again send back my findings so that it becomes part of the investigative file. Prior to having access to this system, we would have to go into a shared folder, and all of the documents were in the shared folder, but pulling them out and putting them in a format that our office could work with was very time consuming and cumbersome. And then when I had to send back memos or any other documents that needed to be attached to that file, I would have to send those documents to an individual within APD who would then have to physically move those documents into that file. So this has made it more efficient for both sides because now the individual from APD does not have to build a separate case file and put it in a shared folder. And I don't have to go in and then upload or rather download all of those documents and begin to build our file. I can do it through Blue Team with just a couple clicks of a mouse. So it makes it very efficient.
Thank you so much, Mr. Fennell. Is there any other questions or comments? Yes, Ms. Enniscap.
Yes, I have just one last question about the interns from APS.
Yes.
Do we have to get any, do you or we have to get any parental consent for the kids that are 17 years old?
Well, I don't believe we'll have to get special parental consent. It'll go through the normal hiring process. So whatever hiring process would be involved with hiring a 17-year-old, the city will have to follow that process. But this is also going through the school and with the counselor, so it's a little unique. It's a little more nuanced than saying hiring a 17-year-old for a fast food restaurant or something. But so to that extent, whatever parental approval that or permission we'd have to receive to hire a 17-year-old is, I believe, what we'd have to follow in the same process.
Well, that's why I asked, because it's going through the school. Does the school need to get parents' permission for the 17-year-olds? Because it's not like a traditional hire on a traditional job.
Ms. Castle.
So if you don't mind, I can answer to that.
Okay.
So when they go through this process, there is a separate process that the schools will go through because that student will need permission to be able to not be at the physical school building during that time. So there is a process that will be coordinated at the schools for this internship opportunity, and parents are involved in that process.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Castle.
All right. Any other questions or comments for Mr. Fennell?
Yeah, I do have a question. So, Mr. Fennell, you mentioned that you and your staff are reviewing over 500 cases, which to me sounds overwhelming. But my question is, so is the purpose of the review of all the cases to then possibly identify problems or issues or problems with patterns or practices? And then if that's the purpose, then would it be your plan to write up some type of recommendation or report? So I'm just trying to understand, it just seems like a lot, and I commend you and your staff both and I've sat with you and I've seen what painstaking work that is. And so I'm just wondering, ultimately to what end that's being done.
Yes, and thank you. I'll say I had to make a decision on how we were going to tackle this problem. And I I basically have said from the date that I started in March, I will begin to look at the cases from March 25th forward, look at those cases for two purposes. One being to issue whether it is concurred, whether the findings we concur with their findings or not, and if so, issue a report for cases for the majority of the cases that were received in the office prior to my arrival. I will look at those strictly for data collection and trends and patterns, and that's why we really need the case management system and database and the interns to input that information into the interns. Now, there have been a few cases, a couple of the reports that instances that were brought to my attention prior to my arrival that the office had received, such as the De'Ara Fields report and a couple of other reports that I've already issued. And so I did look at those, and because of the nature of the use of force within those, felt that it was important to issue a report with recommendations. But in order for this to be manageable, I had to have a starting point. And so I picked that date of March 25th as the starting point, which doesn't mean that everything that we received in 22 and 23 and the early part of 24 won't be analyzed, but it's not going to be analyzed with the intent of issuing a report that would make a recommendation, say, to open an investigation on allegations. It'll be more for the data collection of the type of force that was used, whether we concurred or not, and then build and see what the data tells us. And once we observe what the data tells us, whether there's a trend or pattern or an issue that's identified, then a report will be prepared for that purpose, not strictly for an individual case.
I see.
So it's more of doing a twofold thing. One is a systemic review, going back a couple years to see what the issues are and what's been identified, as well as an individual review going forward.
Okay. And will the that software package that we're looking to purchase, will that help to identify trends, patterns, practices, so that you can ultimately, if it comes to it, make a summary report or make some conclusions about maybe trends that are problematic, or, you know what I mean?
Well, the software itself won't identify the trends or patterns, but the software helps put the data, because the data comes from several different documents, but it helps put the data in a format that can be analyzed. And at the last board meeting, I spoke of looking forward towards next year of maybe creating at least a part-time position of a statistician, the one that can just mine through the data and analyze it at a high-level statistical level to tell us what it tells us. I don't want to presuppose that I know what the data is going to tell me. I want to run various hypotheses and see what the data tells us. And if I think one thing, I want to see if the data tells us that. And if not, I can report out that, this isn't really a problem based on the data. Or I can report that, yeah, we've identified some issues based on the data.
Okay. All right.
So, so the software in the case management is strictly that. It's not a statistical analysis tool.
Yeah, I see.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Any other questions or comments for Mr. Fennell? Okay, thank you, Mr. Fennell, for your report out.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Now we'll go down to Ms. Castle and governance report.
Yes, so following suit with Ms. Holden, thank you for your kind comments during public comment, but it really is an exciting time here as a board. So tonight, as the governance committee, we did want to present a draft of the annual report that we have been working on. So thank you to all of the governance committee members, all of the citizens, also other board members and the OIPA office, because it truly has been a collaborative effort to get this document in draft form, and hopefully we are looking to present it again at our next meeting in 2 weeks for that final version's approval. So everybody received an email earlier today. It has both a PDF version as well as a Canva version. Same exact document, just different ways of looking at it, that we're just asking board members to take a look at. And if you have any feedback, feel free to join us at governance next Wednesday. I think the location is to be determined, so we will notify once Mr. Gippen has scheduled that for us. And we invite community members out. We've had great conversations to build this document. Following suit with the opening of how far we've come with a fully staffed OIPA, as well as, again, a fully staffed board. Working on this document really was an eye-opening experience. It was daunting at times. I think we ended up with about 21 pages worth of history of the last year and a half as a board, but just looking at everything that we've accomplished and how far we've come from even 6 months ago, now that we have an auditor in place and an office. So if you guys take a look at that over the next week or two, if you have any feedback, comments, please feel free to send that to me, just being mindful of sunshine. If you just send that to me, I'll be able to take it to governance if you're unable to attend next week. Thank you so much. And then if anybody does have any general questions or comments, I'm happy to answer those.
Any questions for Ms. Castle on governance? Comments?
No questions. I just wanted to make the comment and say thank you, Ms. Castle, for really leading this annual report production process. I'm pretty sure this is the 4th or 5th draft that you've sent out, and so you've just really done a great job of being sensitive to all the things and really capturing and telling the story of what's taken place since we've been sat since March 8th of last year through our hiring of our deputy auditor. So I just want to applaud and commend you there.
Thank you so much. It has absolutely been my pleasure, and I'm excited to get that final version out there. Fingers crossed, next meeting.
Ms. Castle, I don't think I have it. Did you?
It was sent to all board members, but I can take a look at it. It was sent earlier today.
Okay. What's the title of it? So I can find it, I can just search.
I will have to take a look at that.
Okay.
Okay. And do we have a community engagement report out? All right. Anything for?
I guess
Go
just a
ahead.
quick update, and this will piggyback off of the report out that Ms. Castle gave. We spent a pretty substantial amount of time talking about community engagement at our governance committee meeting last Wednesday, specifically along the lens of Ms. Holden's recommendation, who was at that meeting, that community engagement really focused on the lens of educating folks on exactly what the board does and the process of doing so. And so I anticipate that Mr. Gippen and the governance committee will be bringing forward some additional recommendations and insight with respect to not only what committee structures could look like as it pertains to community engagement, but also how that fits into the board's ongoing conversation about the frequency and the regularity of our meetings, specifically thinking about how we can best maximize the resources of board member time outside of our board meetings with respect to community engagement specifically, and striking a balance with not being overly burdensome on our team that we have through the department. So just kind of a quick update that those discussions are continuing and they are ongoing, and hope to have something to bring forward to the board here in the next coming meetings.
Thank you, Mr. Costa. Mr. Costa, is there anything on finance you'd like to report out on?
No report.
All right. Ms. Richards?
Nothing formal to report. I am going to be in touch with the Human Resources Department from the city to talk about their evaluation process and their cadence of that. don't know if it's a 6-month thing or a 9-month thing, but I want to get in line with what they do as Mr. Fennell's just passed his 6-month anniversary. So I will be in touch with her this week.
Thank you very much. Just
Mr.
my
Chair,
comments.
Mr. Chair, could I speak to that
Yes,
real quick?
please.
Yes, Ms. Richards, I did reach out to HR and respect to the staff evaluations. That is I guess it's an automated process. They will be sending me out something in the next couple of weeks for each employee, and I guess they have a system in place. Respect to myself, I think that there's something that I guess as a board we may have to work together, maybe even with HR. I don't know if they have a template or anything, but I do know that it's pretty much controlled through for the staff.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. My comments, I do want to concur with Ms. Castle in regards to the comments made by Leah. Thank you so much for that. I think we don't take enough time to celebrate what we've accomplished up to this point. To have a fully staffed department and also a fully functioning board, I think is an accomplishment of each and every person on this board. I also believe the work that has been done from our department has been really excellent work regarding not only fielding the complaints and getting back to the public regarding the complaints, but also the recommendations that have been made. So the things that we have been able to, I think, that are within our control, I think that we're controlling them really well because now we are fully staffed. Also, what I would like to just kind of update this board on is that we have a follow-up meeting with the new administration, the mayor's office, and our law department, and I'm assuming that Chief Harding will be there as well. This is a follow-up to a meeting that we had with them. I want to say, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Fennell, back towards the end of summer, maybe it was the end of July, beginning of August, somewhere in that time, to where we did talk about the 45-day policy, but also we want to follow up regarding the policy, Ms. Aniskevich, as far as what we were supposed to hear by the end of August that we haven't heard back from, to see what's going on with those, but also to talk about the continued discussion regarding the RFP and our independent council discussion. So we're excited to meet back with them. I think that is coming up this Wednesday. So I would ask this board if you have any comments or questions that you would like for us to take into that meeting, please email and send those to Mr. Fennell. It will be a meeting that we will be leading because it is a follow-up on a discussion that we had again, I want to say it was maybe a couple of months ago, if I remember that correctly. So what I would want to encourage us all with is that all the great work that's being done at the committee level, and then as we come in here and report those things out in our board meeting and to the community at large, we are handling and controlling the things that are within our control to do. We are executing, if you will, our part of the charter that we have been charged to do. So for that, I just want to say thank you to everybody on this board for your hard work, for your commitment. I know that it has been challenging throughout the way, but man, I do see light at the end of the tunnel for the work that we have been doing. And so those are my comments. If there are any comments to my comments or any questions, please, I encourage you to ask them at this time.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Yeah, I while you were speaking, I went back. I believe the meeting that you spoke of with the mayor's office was first part of July.
Okay.
And that timetable, if I remember correctly, was the 45 days would have taken us into the toward the end of August with a response on the other reports at that time that were issued by the end of September.
Thank you, Mr. Fennell.
Okay.
All right. Is there any other questions, anything else good for the order before we make a motion to adjourn? I make a motion. I get a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, everybody, enjoy the evening. Travel safe, and God bless you. We'll see you next time.